All right, let's talk about how to win a game that feels, well, completely unwinnable. We're going to dive into a core concept in strategy that applies to everything from simple coin flips to really complex human behavior. It's called a mixed strategy.
So I want you to imagine this. You're playing a game, maybe rock, paper, scissors, and your opponent is just perfect. They have a counter for every single move you could possibly make. You play rock, they play paper. You play scissors, they play rock. How on earth do you win?
To figure this out, we're going to use a super classic game theory example. It's called matching pennies. And yeah, it's incredibly simple, but it perfectly captures this really frustrating strategic problem. Okay, so the rules are simple. You and someone else each have a penny. You both secretly choose to show heads or tails, and then you reveal them at the exact same time. If the pennies match, so heads heads or tails tails, player 1 wins. If they don't match, player 2 wins. That's the whole game.
So my first thought, and probably yours too, is, okay, I'll just try to guess what they're going to do, right? If I think player 2 is about to play heads, then my best move is obviously to play heads too. So we match and I get the win. But here's the big problem. If I'm predictable, if I start playing heads over and over, my opponent is going to catch on. They'll spot my pattern and just start playing tails every single time. And just like that, I'm pretty much guaranteed to lose. Okay, fine. So I should switch to playing tails to counter them, right? But the second I do that, they'll see my new pattern and switch right back to playing heads to beat me again. You see the problem? We're just trapped in this endless logical loop where there is no single best move.
You know, this maddening little circle actually has a name in game theory. It means the game has no pure strategy Nash equilibrium. Now that sounds complicated, but in simple terms, it just means there's no single stable choice where both players can just stick to their move and not regret it. Somebody always has a reason to switch.
So the key takeaway here is that a pure strategy is all about being predictable. You pick one move, like always play heads, and you just stick with it. And in this case, predictability is a fatal flaw. It's your Achilles heel.
So if being predictable is the problem, what's the solution? Well, it's elegant, it's a little counterintuitive, but it's incredibly powerful. You have to embrace randomness as your strategy.
This is what we call a mixed strategy. See, instead of trying to outthink your opponent, you basically turn yourself into a strategic coin flipper. You decide you're going to play heads with a certain probability and tails with another.
And in our game of matching pennies, the perfect mixed strategy is just beautiful in its simplicity. You play heads 50% of the time, and you play tails 50% of the time, chosen completely at random. You become perfectly, mathematically unpredictable.
Now this changes everything. The goal is no longer about trying to guess or anticipate what your opponent is going to do on the next turn. That's the old, frustrating way of thinking that got us stuck in that loop.
The new goal is to make your opponent's choice completely meaningless. By playing randomly 50-50, you guarantee that they have no best move. It doesn't matter if they play heads or tails. Their chance of winning or losing is exactly the same. They can't exploit you, because there's no pattern left to find.
So this might feel like it's just about a coin game, but the logic of mixed strategies shows up in the real world in some really profound and sometimes pretty chilling ways. Let's take a look at a famous psychological puzzle, the bystander effect.
Back in 1964, a horrible event in New York City absolutely shocked the nation. Dozens of people heard the screams of Kitty Genovese as she was attacked, but for a critical half hour, not a single person called for help. Why?
I mean, common sense would tell us that the more people who witness an emergency, the higher the chance that at least one of them is going to step up and call the police. That seems pretty obvious, doesn't it?
But incredibly, game theory and the logic of strategic equilibrium predict the exact opposite. And this is a brilliant illustration of just how counterintuitive these forces can be.
What researchers and game theorists have found is that as the number of witnesses, or players in the game, if you will, goes up, the probability that any single person calls for help actually goes down. In a big group, the responsibility just kind of diffuses into the air.
So here's the shocking connection. In a large crowd, each person is thinking, you know what, someone else will probably call. And because the chance of someone else acting feels so high, their own personal need to act goes way down. The problem is, everyone feels this way, so each individual becomes less likely to call. And the tragic result, with more witnesses, the total chance that anyone makes the call can actually drop.
So, from a simple coin toss to the really complex psychology of a crowd, this idea of strategic randomization and equilibrium helps explain behaviors that otherwise just seem baffling.
So let's quickly recap what we've learned. First, being predictable makes you vulnerable. Second, a mixed strategy uses randomness to make you unexploitable. Third, the goal totally shifts. Instead of trying to outguess your opponent, you make it so they have no good guess. And finally, like we saw with the bystander effect, these seemingly rational individual choices can lead to some really surprising and sometimes terrible group outcomes.
And that leaves us with a final thought. You know, this isn't just theory. It applies to penalty kicks in soccer, to cybersecurity, even to business negotiations. So the question to think about is this. In your world, where are the situations where being just a little bit unpredictable might be your most powerful strategy?